So Regan, am I grabbing the first one right there? Is that it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. So John from Oklahoma, what is intended gross margin? John's live, right? So I can ask him questions?
Should be.
Okay. Hey, John, to be able to fill this out, can you kind of give me a quick overview of your pricing model? Like how much do you mark up material? Okay, good. That's 30. All right. So intended gross margin is not saying that you need to raise your prices. A lot of times what ends up happening is I hear people say like, is the only path to making more money raising prices? In most cases, what it is figuring out how to make the money you should in the first place, your intended gross margin. So let's have a look and kind of say from a pricing model material. Yeah, okay. So you take your direct costs. First and foremost, usually, as I said, there is material is the big one, and you have labor, and you have subcontract. Let's just assume that that's what you have. Does John, what do you charge your clients in terms of a shop rate? Actually, you know what? Rather than putting that out on the internet, let's just say you charge $100 and you pay your people $25. That's probably a good look. And the markup on the material, you said 30%. Are you marking it up from a standpoint of multiplying it by 1.3 or dividing it by 0.7? Okay, 1.3. So that's your markup. And subcontract, do you have subcontract? No. I'm going to use this anyways. Okay, I'm going to put it in there. So let's say this is your pricing formula, John. I'm going to assume for a second that in terms of material, we're going to assume for a second you're roughly a $3 million electrical contractor. It doesn't really matter. It just obviously we're going to figure out how it is that we get intended gross margin. So material, you spend $1 million on material. If you marked it up 30%, you multiply it by 1.3, that means essentially you bought it for $1 million and you sold it for 1.3. So your intended gross margin on your material in this particular case is $300,000. Let's take the subs for a second. Let's assume for a second there was $400,000 of subs, and we're going to mark that up 10%. So we bought it for $400,000, we sold it for $460,000. The $60,000 is the intended gross margin. On the labor side, we're going to assume that you have 10 employees, they work 40 hours a week, and they work 50 weeks a year. Let's say they get 2 weeks off. What that tells me is that they're going to bill you 20,000 hours a year. Okay? That's a rough estimate. It's 2,000 per employee. You're going to bill 20,000 hours. That's how many they're going to bill to you. Let's say that your minimum standard was, I'm going to sell 80% of those hours to my clients, right? And that would be a total of 16,000. And if that's true, and we charge $100 an hour in total, that would be $1.6 million in intended labor revenue. Now the cost associated with that is not 16,000 hours, it would be the 20,000 hours your employees are going to bill you, and that's at a $25 rate. So that is roughly $500,000 in terms of cost. So your intended gross margin on your labor, saying at an 80% productivity rate, is $1.1 million. So I now add it up. I got $1.1 million plus the $60,000 on the subs plus the $300,000. So to make it cleaner, when we were going to sell, the material is 1.3, the labor is 1.6, and 460,000 for a grand total. The revenue of this company, based on buying, adding margin, and selling, should be roughly $3,360,000. So one of your first checks, if you're making your gross margin, is you bought it, you added margin, you bought it, you added margin, you bought it, you added margin. So your intended revenue, right, should be based off that equation. I bought it, I added 30% margin, I mark up my employees, and I'm looking for an 80% productivity. And subcontracting, I added 10%, or sorry, I added 15%. I think I did the math on 15%. So this was the intended revenue, but the gross margin in all of this was $300,000 for the material. It was roughly $1.1 million on the labor based on 80% productivity. And it was $60,000 in terms of the subcontract. So the result is that the gross margin intended is $1,460,000, or, sorry, John, I can't do this in my head. We'll do it real quick, 160. It's roughly 43%. So the important part of all of this is that when you go through and you go through your pricing model, thrust it against your costs last year and say, what was my cost in terms of material? What was my cost in terms of labor? What was my cost in terms of subcontract? And what was my markup? And check it at two places. Number one, check it at, did I bring that amount of revenue in? If you didn't bring that amount of revenue in, then something happened along the way here. And usually, and I hate to say it bluntly, John, there was mismanagement. Mismanagement of labor, that's waste staff damage, or sorry, material, waste staff damage. In terms of labor, the labor productivity wasn't at 80%. In the trades right now, and it's not to be in your face, John, they're getting about 60% productivity. Maybe there's some change orders here. And so if the revenue isn't mounting up to what you're buying, adding margin and selling, we've got the first issue here. The second check is to be able to say, okay, what did I add in margin? These values here, this was on the material, this was on the labor, this was on the subcontract. Go through that for yourself again. How much did I add in terms of margin? Bring it into dollars and then divide it into the intended revenue. And essentially, that's how many dollars, or sorry, that's the percentage you should be making on a job-by-job basis. Some are going to be a little bit more, some a little less. But based on this pricing model, that is the intent. So if you do this at home, go through, take your model, add it up, and figure out what this value is, because that is your number one job as the business owner, is to retain whatever you put in there. So if you do raise prices, and that now, let's say we add 5%, and that goes to 48, your job is still to retain that. If you decide you're going to enter the market and lower your prices, and that goes down to 38 by taking 5% off, make sure you make the 38. The thing I've seen in 88,000 businesses in the last 25 years is whatever this number is, they don't have the things in place to actually control and the outcome of the game and make sure that that 43 shows up in the first place. You want to be strategic after that, that's fantastic. You have to be able to be strategic, but you have to be able to retain this one here. Okay? I hope that answered your question. Yes, thank you, John.